That'll
chat.
be the first question that we ask. Well, hey everyone, welcome to our Monday night live stream. We are kicking it here with Thrash Pondo Pons. As always, how you doing, my friend Thrash?
Oh, you know me, never better.
Yes, and well, I wouldn't expect anything less, right? I mean, never better. That's how it always is, I'm sure. But at least on these live streams. Like, well, when we have a special guest with us, and that is Anthony from Rush Trader. How you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you guys.
Yeah, it is really good. And a little backdrop of the story. I reached out to you actually quite a while ago, and you weren't sure kind of how it worked with streaming and stuff like that. And then eventually you got back to me, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh my gosh, you actually got back because you finally hit me up and said, yeah, hey, I think I got this thing figured out. And so here we are. We did an interview, and we talked about the Beatles and a lot of other stuff. At the beginning of the interview, I said, hey, it might be a little while before we get to the Beatles because, we just kind of chatted and got to know each other a little bit about our musical taste and background and stuff like that. And your stuff in radio and everything. And then we did talk about the Beatles for quite a while. So I can legitimately say it was about the Beatles, even though there was a lot of other stuff. Let me say hi to a couple people who are in the room tonight before we get into our interview and let you, the audience, interact with our guests. Anthony from Rush Trader. And by the way, if you've not checked out his site, you need to go over there to rushtrader.com and Rush Trader on YouTube and subscribe. Show him some love. Subscribe to his channel and make some comments on some of his videos. We have
Mr. Led, looking forward to this. Love the Beatles.
As do I, my friend, as do I.
Trace Ross Myers. Hi, y'all. Hi, y'all to you, Trace.
Hi,
Hello,
Tracy.
Tracy.
Yes, hello. And by the way, Tracy, I did send you my email, and I'm looking forward to whatever you wanted to tell me in email. So just so you know, I've got it to you. And let's see here. We also have
Superplex. Who was your favorite Beatles? Good question.
we're gonna save that for just a second. Let me get through saying hi to people in the chat room here. Make sure we got all of them. I know there's more people watching than just chatting, but I just want to make sure I acknowledge everybody here. Tracy acknowledges us.
Oh, Trace says hi, Ian and Robert and Anthony. And hello to you,
Hello.
too.
Hello, Tracy. And look who else we've got here.
George Years. Hello, gentlemen. Hello to you. Always a pleasure.
Yes, glad to
George
have
is
you.
always on my mind.
That's got to be a song, right?
Two of them, actually. One from the Beatles.
I see. I see.
Oh, number one dude. Hey, fellas, it has been a long time. Ian, Thean, Thrash, hope you're doing well. Mr. Number One Dude, it's always good to see you.
Yeah, it is always good to see you. And of course, we've got
John Collins.
John
Hello,
Collins in the
Ian and Bob.
house.
John, so good to see
And
you.
don't forget to say hello to our guest here too, John. We got Anthony here. He'd appreciate a hi and a shout out. And I think that's it for the comments.
If you're from the New England area, hey, Anthony.
Are you from the New England area, Anthony?
Well, from Brooklyn originally. So you're kind of like, hey, Anthony, something, it's got to have a little bit more gusto in it.
There was an old commercial here in the New England area from Worcester, I believe. And this kid, Anthony Montietti. And his mother would come home for dinner. She'd be like, hey, Anthony. Because Wednesday was, everyone, Prince Spaghetti Day.
Oh, yes.
Wow. Right.
Okay, see, when I was a kid, when I knew it was time to come home because my mother would yell up the street and everybody could hear it, but I could hear it. And that was my time to come home when she yelled right up the street. So.
Right. And you knew that was time.
I knew it was time for pasta. Yeah.
Lance Joffin says, hey, guys. Hey, Lance.
Hey, Lance.
Hello.
Well, sorry. Go ahead and say
I'm
hi.
just saying hello to everybody, Thanks for coming by.
Yes,
and saying hi.
Sure. And ask your question about the Beatles or Anthony and his channel too. That's open discussion as well. And kind of wherever you want the conversation to go. I mean, really, wherever you want the conversation to go. And actually, Thrash Pons, my good friend, asked you the first question off the air, and I do want to hear an answer to this, Anthony. So, Thrash, ask Anthony on air the question.
Having watched the initial interview, I was amazed by your knowledge, and my question was, has this been a lifelong fandom with you, or at least how long have you been a Beatles fan?
Well, to be honest, I've been a fan of the Beatles since I'm a kid, and I think I told Ian that I confiscated every single one of my father's Beatles albums because he had all of them on vinyl, and I probably should have taken better care of them, maybe because they're probably collectibles. But anyway, I confiscated them, listened to them, and as I told Ian too, when John Lennon died, that was the first death that I remember really, really. It was the first death of anybody, even anybody personally. I just really felt something really, really bad in my soul when I heard that he died. It was like, I was a 10-year-old kid. Like, I couldn't even look at the album covers. I just couldn't stand to see John. It was just such a weird feeling that I had. I didn't know what to do about death and how to make sense of it and everything. But the Beatles were always a band that I respected and I appreciated. But I have to tell you, when the documentary came out, that's when, as we were talking about, that's when I went down the rabbit hole because the documentary brings up so many different things, and there's so much to dig into. I mean, it's, so many topics that you can talk about there. And so, really, my fascination with the Beatles has come on as of late in terms of really digging in and trying to make sense of everything,
Right. And as I said too, one of the very first albums, actually in the first set of albums that I ever got, was Paul McCartney's Pipes of Peace. And it was in 1985, I think, and I think I was like 10 years old. And of course, I did not know that Paul McCartney was in this other band. That was kind of my exploration at 10 years old. It was just like, oh, he's the guy. I knew about the Beatles. So everybody said that my mom was into the Beatles and everything. But, it was just like, that was my exploration into, that's the guy who's in the Beatles. And then I listened to the Beatles after that. We got some stuff here. We got to say hi to some people. Danny.
Dan's Daily, the good stuff. Come together right now over this show.
Yes. Come together right now. All right.
John Collins. Anthony, do you enjoy the earlier, more poppy Beatles or the more progressive, experimental, later Beatles?
Oh, I would have to go with the later Beatles. I mean, I appreciate the early stuff, but, they just kept evolving and breaking ground. Sgt. Pepper's is still an album that I listen to, and it kind of so much going on there. And as they grew, really, John, Paul, and George were getting better and better, and just the songwriting. I really was a bigger fan of the second half. Definitely. How about you guys? Are you more into the early stuff or the later stuff?
It's so funny you mentioned that because you were talking about your father and confiscating his records.
Yeah.
Both my parents were avid Beatles fans even before they started dating, and both of them introduced it to me when I was literally a toddler. I could name all 4 Beatles before I could name all my uncles. Granted, I had more uncles, but I knew them all. Bam, bam, bam. I used to watch the cartoon with my dad on Saturday mornings. And one of my earliest memories was going into a shopping mall. This is probably 70, 71. I was preschool. And they say, look, Robbie, that's the Beatles. And I see these 4 guys with these like Nehru jackets and mop tops. And I go, huh? And they go, that's the Beatles. And I go, no, they got long hair and goatees and are wearing, tie-dyes. And they go, no, that's what the Beatles look like early days.
Right.
So I kind of came in when they were already progressive. I do, as you say, appreciate their earlier stuff, but I would have to go with their later, more polished catalog.
And really what's so amazing is the growth that they had just in a few years. I mean, what bands grow like that we've seen? I mean, it seems like bands will take 5 or so years just to make a second album, and then it sounds the same as the last one. I mean, the way that they grew from album to album, look at how they changed from 62, 63 to 1970. I mean, it's like a completely different band, and they went down such all these different styles and everything, and it's just really blows my mind, because there's not a lot of bands that show that kind of growth within a very short period of time. But then again, they were at the point where pretty much anything you did was breaking ground. They were there to do exactly that, with every album.
Yeah, I kind of got them as when I was introduced to them, I was introduced to them as a set. I wasn't introduced to them like in a progressive nature. I remember really kind of more or less hearing songs from the Beatles rather than whole albums from the Beatles. Of course, I think the earliest song that I ever heard was "Come Together Right Now." I mean, I remember hearing that on the radio because when I was a very young child, I was tooling around with my mom in her car, listening to what she's listening to, and you have the ABBA and things like that, and then the Beatles come on, so. I remember that distinctly, but I don't, I mean, of course, I like the later Beatles better, especially if you were really to force me into one album, it would be the White Album. I thought the White Album was kind of
the Beatles.
Yeah, that was more me, but the earlier stuff was poppy, breaking ground. But of course, you get into that whole introspective, exploring, their existential ideas and stuff like that, and later. So, all right, let's see. We've got some. I just wanted to acknowledge some people here.
Flick Snacks and Knickknacks in the house.
How you doing, buddy?
I hope you were all well in that chat. We're even better now that you're here.
Yes, for sure, brother. And I think John Collins writes here.
Anthony, yes, sir. I agree that later music meant more, and it was mean more. I think it meant more, means more, or something like that. He meant something positive. Whatever it is, we agree.
Right. It was positive. I still think there is a sense in which, they're trying to appeal to a little bit of a larger audience. I don't think, please don't misunderstand me in any way. It's not as though they were selling out or anything like that at the very beginning and then later went and did their own thing. I think they were their own band all the way through. But there is a sense in which the early stuff was more, hey, this is what crowds like and what we want to play. And then later you've got, this is what we like and what we want to play. And you see that with all kinds of bands. Nirvana, as I've mentioned, is one of my all-time absolute favorite bands. And of course, Smells Like Nevermind is completely different than In Utero. And In Utero, though, is what Kurt Cobain said, is that's the sound that's been in my head that I've wanted to do the whole time. And so, you just develop, you just change. All right.
You also have to go to where, the record producers tell you what you're going to do. The more successful you are, the more creative you're permitted, but you still get to answer to the money men. Oh, Superplex says, from 1964 to 1970, the Beatles produced one album every year.
Wow, that is that is a lot of albums.
Yeah, and that's something else too. What other bands put out albums every single year, and they just happen to be albums that, are groundbreaking with all these songs that are just blowing people's minds. I mean, that was, I don't know, that was the time for the Beatles to kind of do that kind of thing. It was a time when everybody was kind of exploring a lot of different things, but they certainly had something special in the way that they wrote.
And the way they progressed too, like you were saying, like from the very beginning to the very end, it's a very different band, where a lot of bands, they don't do that. Some bands do, and it's tragedy. And they do it because they want to do it as artists, but it's just tragedy. The fans don't like it. Where with the Beatles, they just gained more fans, doing that. I'm sure they ruffled a couple feathers, but all right, let's see here. We got a very interesting question. I'm interested to hear your take on this, Anthony.
Mr. Led says, can Ant expound on the death of Paul? Real or a conspiracy?
I never really went down that rabbit hole, to be honest with you. I mean, I remember hearing about it, but I really can't give you too much insight. I mean, I don't think I think it's a bunch of BS, but I don't really know much about it. I really never dug into it. Do you guys know anything about it?
I do, and it was a publicity stunt.
Yeah.
Somehow they got it stuck in their head that Paul had been killed and was replaced with a stand-in, and they actually gave some false clues to kind of keep this going and make it like a gimmick. But no,
Yeah.
Paul McCartney is very much alive. I do have a very interesting tidbit. If anyone has an interest. This was actually pointed out to me ages ago, but there's a number of points that actually support this. I can't think of which album it was. It was the one with Day in a Life. Help a brother out here.
That's Sergeant Pepper's.
All right, it was. I was going to say that. For some reason, it didn't sound right in my head. If you listen to A Day in the Life, it kind of gives hints that John will die very soon. And when they say the English army has won the war, they're actually not referring to World War II. They're referring to the Anglo-Argentinian War, which was approximately the same time as he died, and how the English went from mourning John to celebrating victory against Argentina. Whoop, whoop. And there's a number of foreshadowings, if you listen to the music, that actually would again foreshadow John Lennon's death. And that I found very interesting. You actually have to listen to yourself and kind of pick them out. But there's enough there that actually I found very interesting.
Wow.
Well, there was also, wasn't there something with when he was crossing Abbey Road with he didn't have shoes on or something.
And he's out of
like
step.
that.
Yes, Paul's out of step.
Paul's out of step with everybody else. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one of those interesting things. There's a Simpsons episode with Paul McCartney in it.
Bigger than Jesus.
And it's when what'd you say? Bigger Jesus?
Oh no, please forgive me. It was when they were doing their meteoric Homer's band went very, very big. And Lisa asks him, "Don't tell me you did something stupid like say you were bigger than Jesus." He goes, "Are you kidding me? We said it all the time. That was the name of our second album." And Bigger than Jesus.
Oh yeah, I got
Sharps.
Right,
So,
right.
forgive me.
No problem. But at the very end of it, like after the Simpsons, the credits are rolling, Paul comes on and says, "I'm very much alive, thank you." So that was pretty funny. And just real quick, Amy Smith says, "Hi, Aunt."
Hey, Amy. It's great to see you.
Glad you could be here.
Amy's a fan from over on my channel, and
really?
I have to get with Amy about doing a follow-up. She initially, I remember it's been probably about 3 or so years, wanted me to do a video about bands that ought to hang it up. That really, it's kind of getting to the end. Maybe they should just kind of call it a day. And I did a video. I think there's been enough time to do another one. And so I'm trying to put together a list of artists who maybe, the expiration date's coming, and maybe it's time to do something else, because some of these guys are really, really not showing up for work, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So we'll have to talk about that, Amy.
I see that in a lot of venues. I see that especially in comedy. Like you'll get a stand-up comedian that will be like really funny on their first 2 or 3 albums, and then like their 4th album, it's just like, this isn't funny anymore. It's just not as funny as at least as it used to be. Speaking of that, though, do you think that when the Beatles called it quits, do you think that was a good idea?
No, I think that they could have done both. It was just the circumstances that were going on, and the band did not really allow for that. I don't know that, and I was thinking about this too. There was no real precedent for not really much of being in a band and having a solo career. It's like you either did one or the other,
right?
Because we're talking about 1970 here. How many bands had experimented with that? Going solo and keeping the band alive. There really was nobody doing that. And the Beatles, they just kind of splintered apart. And I wish that they hadn't done that. But I also, as we talked about last week, Ian, I think that the Beatles could have gotten back maybe in the 80s or 90s if John had stayed alive. I really think it could have been, especially with Jeff Lynne, who was such a Beatles fan, who actually did work with the remaining Beatles on a John Lennon unfinished song that they actually wound up turning into. There were two of them, a couple of Beatles songs that they did with Jeff Lynne, and I think there could have been something there, probably with getting all of the Beatles back. But it's a shame that really never happened.
Well,
Yeah,
Matt?
I remember. Sorry, right.
Oh no, I'll wait.
One thing, I just remember talking with you about that and saying that was one of the biggest tragedies about John Lennon dying too. I mean, the big tragedy obviously is he died, but the other big tragedy is you're never going to see that band again. You know, there's always hope that band will be back together, but with his death, it's pretty much over. Thrash, go ahead.
Oh yeah, you said something in the earlier interview which intrigued me. You said that Paul and John had reconciled right before John's death, and that you believe that they were considering future collaborations. With Lennon's death, do you think that's why in the early to mid 80s we saw Mr. McCartney collaborating with many, many other giants in the industry? Remember, he put out an album with Stevie Wonder. He did collaborations with Michael Jackson. Was it because he had this sort of need to collaborate, but had lost the original person, so was now looking for other directions to go in? Any possibility that there was a connection?
I never thought about that, really. I don't know.
That's kind of like getting into the mind of Paul McCartney.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of lost the collaborative partnership when they went solo. Because John had Yoko, but that was nothing. There was nothing there for that. I mean, not for my taste. I'd never pulled anything out of that songwriting team. Paul had Wings, but that kind of fell apart after a period of time. He was working with some specific people. That kind of worked. He wrote with his wife's son, but Paul was pretty much on his own writing a lot of this stuff, and George was pretty much on his own. And I think that there was a magic when they all kind of, and you see this in the Get Back documentary, is how they, as much as they were going through, they were always trying to pull stuff out of each other and trying to help each other. Even when it came to like Ringo, you know, there's a great scene of George helping Ringo work on Octopus's Garden, and it was just great watching him sitting there trying to help him come up with something, you know, to make that work. And they were all very, very helpful, you know, even right up until the end when the wheels were coming off. You know, that was really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, we got some chatter here. We're going to go ahead and look at it.
Zubaplex says, they say if you play a record backward, you would hear the words "Paul is dead," but I forgot which song, which was the song.
I don't remember.
I don't remember that. I do remember a lot of backward masking stuff that when I was a kid, they were coming up with all kinds of songs that had these backward messages in them. So I used to spin the albums backward, and you'd hear just all kinds of weird things trying to make out what they might be saying. And that was a crazy time. I don't know if you guys, I mean, we're talking, when I was doing this, it must have been in the early to mid 80s when especially they were coming out with, you know, certain, you know, there were like specific ones like Stairway to Heaven had like a satanic message in it. You know, like another one, Bites the Dust, was supposedly telling you to go smoke weed, you know, and it was crazy. And the artist would be like, you know, we don't have time to, you know, like we can't even get it right going forward. What do you think? We're trying to do it backwards? Like, what are you kidding?
Well, listen, I've told this story before, but I had a friend who in the 80s was blind. And I knew him before he was blind. We were kids together, and then he actually got in this really tragic accident and became blind. And he was one of the best guitarists I've ever met. And because he was blind, he was able to get these books on tape, like pretty much any book you wanted. And the tapes were special because they were 4-sided tapes. It was kind of weird. It had 4 tracks on each of the tapes. I don't know if you've ever run into that, but if you took the tape and you like a regular tape and you played it forward and then played the side like A1 backwards, or you would hear the regular songs backwards. And we did try this on a couple of songs, and we did try it on another one, Bites the Dust, and it's the weirdest thing. It says it all kind of weird, but it says start to smoke marijuana.
Yeah.
Over and over again. It's not just like you would think like through the song it would change words, but it literally through the entire song says start to smoke marijuana.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the weirdest thing. Now it doesn't say it normally. It's like start to smoke marijuana. It's this weird kind of voice, but it's distinct. And what's even weirder about it is we used to stay up all night and record stuff and pretend we were on the radio and things like that. And we used to just say another one bites the dust. We'd say the words to another one bites the dust. And I crap you not, my friend. I crap you not. Just saying it, just singing it or just saying the words into it. You play it backwards and it says start to smoke marijuana. It was the weirdest thing. It was just the weirdest. It was the weirdest thing. All right, let's see. We've got some comments here in the chat. Unfortunately, Lance Chafin is not going to be with us the rest of the evening. No. He said he had a friend that got shot or something. That's sad. No. I'm sorry to hear about that. And I guess it was his birthday as well. So happy birthday, Lance.
Happy birthday, Lance. Very sorry.
And Tracy has a comment here. Let you read that, Thrash.
I like the Beatles from Revolver and From There.
I think so. I think most people would say that. I mean, I don't hate their earlier stuff. I don't think Anthony does either. But
no.
But Revolver On was really where they kind of picked up steam.
Oh, and Mr. Cohen says, Anthony, have you ever been in any Italian period piece films? You look as if you're straight out of Central Casting.
That's a good one. That's a first. Never, no. I can't say that I am.
All right. Well, we got to bring this up, and this is really true.
Teresa Rosmana says, I know that this is not Beatles related, but I am grieving Mike Nesmith passing.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'll speak last. Anthony.
It's just a shame to see all these guys. I knew this was going to happen. There comes a point where there's so many artists, and there comes a point where the end of the road, is going to come for a lot of these guys. And there's so many. I mean, I even did a video about all of them that I could think of that were just hitting 80, because we're kind of reaching that point where now, some of the ones that are in the forefront, like even Paul, I think he's 79 now. I believe it's 79, or he's very, very close to, 80. And I think Ringo is already, isn't he 82 or something? I mean, maybe I'm getting my numbers mixed up, but I think these guys, and so, yeah, it's really sad about the Monkees with Mickey Dolenz is the only one left, and they just finished up the farewell tour, so they had kind of put an end to the Monkees, and it's a shame. It really is sad,
Right. Thrash, you want to say anything about it?
Well, just two things. One, rest in peace, Mr. Gentleman. It was very, very sad, and commiserations, Mickey, on the loss of your last bandmate, let me say. But it is Beatles related in the sense there was that epic story of when the Monkees went to London on tour. Supposedly the Beatles threw them this incredible big bash, and they talked about it for the rest of their days. They actually, if you ever see the movie, the behind the scenes story of the Monkees, that's like one of their biggest heydays is when the Beatles threw them a party.
Oh,
yeah. So. I was a big Monkees fan. Big Monkees fan. Of course, Monkees became relevant again to my generation because on MTV they started playing their television show again, and I really enjoyed the television show in the 80s. We were huge fans, and it was really sad, and I remained a fan throughout my life. Unfortunately, death is a part of life. And it's like you're saying, they're getting to a point, and we're more connected now. Even though we don't know these people, you hear about deaths right away. You know what I mean? It's just like boom, boom. Before it used to be like you had to read a magazine, and before that it was like either in the paper. It's just like you hear like maybe 2 weeks later from the guy who read, Circus Magazine or Metal Edge or the Inquirer or something, and then they told you at school, oh, did you hear? Somebody passed away. And now we're just seeing it happen more often. It's like every day you wake up and you hear about another actor or another, another artist who died. And it's sad. It's sad. But I think anybody who has died would just want us to go on living the best lives we could possibly live.
And I guess the best thing that we can do is to kind of do what we're doing in our own ways, is to further it by keeping it alive. We talk about it. We maybe give people, leads to go check out some of this stuff. And,
Right.
I just love to see when people pass this stuff on. It really amazes me, because there's a whole thing with people doing these videos where they're reacting to songs, and it's kind of strange seeing people reacting to songs that I grew up with, and they're just now hearing them now for the very first time. And it's like, wow. And part of me is thinking, what are you, crazy? How could you have never heard this? But then I'm thinking, wait a minute, I'm an old man here. I'm like, I'm 52. And so I'm thinking these kids, they're in their 30s. When would they have ever heard this? That you have to be fortunate to have parents that are cool, that maybe turned you on to it, or, because how else are you going to hear it? I mean, turning on the radio is not what it was, so these kids are going out of their way, and I got to give them props for it. And they're really turned on by it. And it's really cool to see people getting off on these songs that we grew up with now. It's really, really great. Just goes to show you how these songs can stand up. They may have been written in the 70s, but they're so good that they sound great now, that people aren't just like, tossing them out and going, oh, this is just old garbage.
Right. It used to be that way too. Like, it'd have to be like a really, iconic band when I was growing up to listen to something that my parents had listened to. And now it seems to be a little bit more acceptable to listen to something your parents or your grandparents listened to. It seems to be like, okay, we're going to, especially with the advent of YouTube, like you're saying, you watching reactions of people listening to stuff. All right, we got a few comments here.
Mr. Led, Ant, were the Beatles the first group to really use stereo?
I really have no idea. I don't know who the first band was to use stereo. I really don't.
I don't either. That's
Don't
a
have
good question
information on that one. Yeah,
that's a Google question.
May have been one of the first bands that I played on my stereo, but I can't tell you about stereo. Just don't know.
I know this. I know that.
We can ask Ronnie Skelter, but he's dead.
Yeah. Hey Jude was the first song on radio to exceed 3 minutes or something like that. Remember that? That was they broke a record. Yeah, like they wouldn't play anything over like 3 minutes on the radio until Hey Jude came out, and that held the record. All right, more comments here.
Superplex says, the fact the Paul, John, and George had hit songs after the breakup only underscore they could have success after the breakup.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I agree with Ant. They could have done both. They could have gotten, but they probably would have.
Well, look at the Who. The Who all had solo albums and kept the band going for years. So if the Who could do it, the Beatles could have done it. Right.
I think so too.
I think with the Beatles, though, they were three dominant songwriting. Like it would have been hard to keep them happy in one group, especially George, because as we talked about, he only got one or two songs an album, and that just wasn't going to fly.
No.
And then he comes out of the Beatles, and his very first album is a triple album set full of stuff that he's been sitting on, and it's gold.
It really was beautiful music.
If they would have kept it would have almost been like the Beatles was the side project, because they just couldn't come together, and you have three artists who all are vying to be the voice of that band. And then you have two artists who are already the voice of that band, and that's John and Paul. And that's too much right there. And you know what, I was thinking about this. I'm going to get to some of these questions. I got John Collins here going to ask this question. But before we get to this, I thought about this because we were talking last time about this idea of people vying for voices in the band. And I thought about John and Paul. They were the two. And then I thought about a later band that has kind of a John and Paul relationship, and that's Kiss. Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons are Kiss. But Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons have weathered the storm, and I really believe this way, and I don't mean this to any disrespect to Kiss, but I think their relationship is a business relationship first, and a music relationship second. I think they're business first, they're artists. And the artist might be a close second, and they're always thinking what's best for the business. Where
Yeah.
John and Paul are like, well, what do I want to do as an artist? Kind
Right.
of thing. So
Definitely.
I don't know. That just throwing that out there. Because
It holds water. It does
Yeah.
hold water. It makes sense. I mean, let's say Gene Simmons is like a consummate businessman.
Yeah.
So I could see him. I wouldn't say compromising his art for business, but I can certainly see business being a more bigger component than it was with John Lennon.
Well, you just look at the band. I mean, itself, Kiss. I mean, they're these 70s kind of iconic rock bands in the vein of Black Sabbath and all these other bands. And then when hair metal comes out, they turn hair metal. And then when grunge comes out, they try to turn grunge, but the grunge community is not the alternative rock community is not going to go for that. They don't. I mean, if there's anything about the alternative rock community is they don't like phonies. They don't like people jumping on the bandwagon. Either you are alternative or you're not. So they're business people. They're good musicians. Don't misunderstand me. They write great songs, really hit songs. But I think that's the difference. I was trying to think of the difference between like a situation like Paul Stanley and Gene and John and Paul.
Well, if you want to know how really much of a business they are, watch them keep on going after they're both out of the band, because all you really got to do is put 4 guys out there in makeup and you can send them around the world. You can send multiple teams around the world, have one of them doing a Vegas residency, send another overseas, and you got Kiss, and that'll just keep on. That's what's going to happen, is from what I see. And they may even sell it to somebody else. I've even heard about that they may just sell the whole thing for $1 trillion, and you can make money off of that. That's like having your own, ATM machine. You just keep on printing out money.
Like Blue Man Group, only with music.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. Instead of, painting your head blue,
You're
do whatever they want,
like a kitty cat or a Star Child.
Right.
John Collins says, Anthony, do you enjoy I've Got My Mind Set on You?
Yeah, well, that's really when George Harrison he kind of lost some steam with the whole solo thing, but he picked it up in the mid 80s. And that's thanks to Jeff Lynne, who was a huge, huge Beatles fan. I mean, listen to ELO and you can hear the Beatles dripping all over it. And so when he got to a point where he became friends with George, and they did the whole Traveling Wilburys thing too. And so Jeff was a great influence with George and really helped him out with the Cloud 9 album and put him really, really back on the map. You got to thank Jeff for really bringing him back. And so, yeah, I'm fine with that stuff.
I liked it too. I think we said that probably the person who benefited the most from the Beatles splitting up was George. I mean, he got a chance to be his own artist, whether it was as big as John and Paul or not. He just got a chance to be his own voice, which I don't think he ever would have if he would have stayed with the Beatles. I just think it was the best for him.
Yeah.
I did like the Weird Al parody. This song is only 6 words long.
6 words long, this song.
Yeah. Song is only 6 words long, but I'm gonna make money.
Gonna make a whole lot of money.
I don't know if I ever heard that one.
It was off in 3D or something. It was one of his. Oh, actually, I think it was even worse. The one he made in the late 80s. But yeah, it was a Weird Al parody.
Yeah.
But yeah. Number one dude says, I always liked Twist and Shout because it was from one of my favorite movies, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Can't argue with that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Love that movie.
Dan's Daily the Good Stuff says, LOL, I loved that Caveman movie with Ringo in it. Funny, funny movie. The spoof on 1 million BC.
Yeah, I remember going to a drive-in movie, and that was I think that might have been the opening film. Because there was usually a couple of them, so they threw Caveman out first. And then they gave you the good movie.
Yeah.
That was a long, long time ago, yeah.
Zupalik says, I got the impression John was on his own songwriting-wise towards the end.
Yeah, well, one thing we see in the Get Back documentary is that John has run out of ideas, at least for that particular thing. He didn't come in with very, very much. Of course, that may sound bad, but they just got through doing the White Album, so let's cut the guy some slack. I mean, that's the other thing, is that this documentary takes place just a couple of months after the White Album comes out. So they're really just, after that big thing, now they're back to writing again, and John is kind of light, but he starts to pick up steam for the Abbey Road sessions, and then that's when he starts to put out like Instant Karma and that kind of stuff. So he I guess you could say that he got it going again.
Right. Yeah, for sure. All right.
John Collins, Ian, you are really, really fond of the tape story. I believe he means fond.
Yeah, fond
Really
of the
fond
tape
of the tape
story.
story.
Yeah, sorry. I tell the same story quite a bit, but hey, it came up kind of naturally. Like I didn't like. It's not like I was like waiting to tell the tape story.
Jackhammered in. No,
I'm
it was
like,
very organic. Very organic.
Yeah, it was. We were talking about backward masking, man. We were talking about it. All right.
Oh, and I believe it was the number 9 song that had the backwards message that we were talking about. Paul is dead. Paul is dead. I believe it's number 9. Number 9.
Oh, the Revolution 9. Yeah.
Thank you. I knew it was something 9.
Yeah, that was a real freaky track. That used to scare the hell out of me when I was a kid. There was a part in there towards the end where a guy sounded like he was shaking or shivering, and it was kind of coming out of each channel. And you put that on with the headphones, and you won't sleep at night. Well, if you're like a 9-year-old kid, you're not going to sleep. Yeah, that was some. That was the thing about the Beatles. They were just all over the place. Some even say that like Helter Skelter was the first real metal song. Because it was, among the earliest of the real, aggressive, heavier tracks. So I don't know if you guys ever thought about that, but
that Helter Skelter was what? Was really what? Say that again.
Like the prototype for like a metal song. Like it was there, even though it wasn't considered metal, but it was definitely one of the more heavier, kind of darker tracks to come out. I mean, this is like 1968.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. I can see Ozzy Osbourne being influenced by it with his later work with Black Sabbath. So yeah, I can certainly see it as a template.
Yeah, I can too. That does make sense. I mean, you might even make an argument there that was the first heavy metal song.
Although You Really Got Me by the Kinks is often credited as having the first like heavy kind of riff to it, because I think that Dave Davies, he cut his amp head.
Yeah,
so
right.
Kind of gave off a dirtier kind of a sound and everything. But that was that. But Helter Skelter was a sustained attack for however long that was, and it was just so aggressive and so unlike the Beatles. Really, it was really just like another example of them going to a place where they had never been before, and that we had never been there before either.
Right. Yeah. Well, I do know that Motley Crue covered that song on "Shout at the Devil."
That's right. Yeah.
They did that, and then also you too covered that song as well.
That's true.
Yeah. So it was a big cover. Those are two different bands altogether, huh?
And I thought that they did a really good job with it.
Yeah. Who did a really good job? Which
U2.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't as familiar with that one as I was with
Motley Crue. I can't remember. I know they did it, but I can't like hear it in my head.
Yeah. Well, I was so dumb that I thought it was a Motley Crue song. When I heard, I didn't know it was a Beatles song. And then everyone was, when I was talking to some people that that recently, like, that I had met after they were talking about Helter Skelter, and I'm like, yeah, by Motley Crue, and they're like, no, the one by U2. I'm like, what? And then I discovered, oh yeah, hey, this is a Beatles song. This is not. That was pretty dumb, man. That was pretty dumb. Trying to warn you here. All right, we got Jill Carter in the house.
Oh, Jill Carter. Hello, Jill. Pleasure as always. Hello, everyone.
All right, and let's see.
The Daily Dan blog is also with us. Awesome stuff. Love the monkeys, as do we all. Superplex. I think the Beatles might not have been the first, but they did popularize music videos. Thank you, Richard Lester.
Well, I don't know. I mean, they popularized music videos. I don't know.
To an
I would have
extent.
to. What do you think, Anthony?
Well, they definitely did some visuals. They had some films that they did, like Help and Hard Day's Night and the Magical Mystery Tour, and so they definitely put themselves out there. I don't know that it worked for them very, very well. I don't know that because the whole Magical Mystery Tour was seen as kind of a bit of a flop, and which is why Paul wanted to do this thing with the Get Back thing. We're always getting back to that, but that was his next thing that he wanted to do to kind of right the ship from having gone down the whole Magical Mystery Tour. He wanted to write a new album in a couple of weeks and perform it live, and then that was going to be the next thing that, didn't quite go the way that they wanted to. But in terms of music videos and the Beatles, I don't know. There were a lot of things in the 70s that kind of, especially when glam started coming in and things got a bit more visual, like Queen doing the Bohemian Rhapsody, they made a video. And so there was some priming going on in the 70s before we got a 24-hour channel,
Well,
The
in the
Beatles
80s
added
too.
to it.
I remember having shows like there was it was on like a regular television show, but it was Friday night videos. You know what I mean? MTV was not the only spot you watched videos. It was like part of like, I remember even Nickelodeon had a video block. They would do, they would do like a half-hour videos. And, my friends.
I didn't get MTV till 1986. So before then, I would watch Friday night videos. HBO had a jukebox thing that was on there.
Video jukebox.
Yes.
That went back to the 70s. I remember that one too.
Yeah. And TBS was another channel. They had I think like the Superstation, they had like an overnight thing that ran. I used to run my VCR. I used to put a tape in there and I would do the whole 6-hour stretch from midnight to 6. And then I would watch it the next day, just whatever I could to watch. Cause it was, a different way to see these bands. I mean, I had never really seen a lot of these bands. We take it for granted now with the internet and everything. And these bands are in our face on Facebook. They're, we get sick of them before we even hear the first song. But back when I was growing up, and if you were a child of the 70s and 80s, in the 80s, like we didn't see these bands much. You saw them like in magazines, maybe on an
Talk
interview on something, maybe there if you went to see them live, but you really had no idea some of these people, what they even looked like,
That showcase you were talking about, was that called Night Flight?
Yeah, well, that was on the USA channel.
Oh, because that was a different one. That you were
TBS had something. I don't remember what it was called.
Because I remember Night Flight. But
Night Flight was I also watched that. They had more offbeat stuff. They kind of mixed in different things, and I mean that's how you had to watch videos, and when you didn't have the big one. Yeah.
Right. All right, we got some more comments here.
More comments. Joe Tyers says, Anthony, I consider you to be a young, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
A man. I will be 60 in a month.
Okay.
I'm 54, so I'm in the middle.
Okay. Well, now I do feel young now. Thanks.
Happy early birthday to you. Make sure you tell us as well when that comes up.
To you. Daily Dan's of the Good Stuff says, Kiss did that solo album stuff and still stayed together well for a while anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they did.
Yes, for sure they did. What's this say here?
Superplex. John was on a tangent towards the end.
Yeah.
Tangent.
Yeah, he had some really good stuff on the final Beatles album on Abbey Road. He had some really good stuff. That's my favorite Beatles album. That's where I think everything kind of gelled, and they I don't know. I enjoyed that album from start to finish more. No, there isn't a whole lot. Octopus's Garden I could probably do without. maybe Maxwell's Silver Hammer. Don't really need those two, but everything else I think shines. I think it's really, really a very strong way to go out. You know.
Yeah.
I did love Steve Martin's rendition of Silver Hammer on the musical Strawberry Fields Forever. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Did you ever see that one?
I don't remember that. No.
They have Steve Martin come out and do a rendition of Maxwell's Silver Hammer, and he like really sort of camps it up. It's hysterical.
It probably was, because that guy is
one of the best comedians ever.
Yep.
Mr. Led says, I guess at 66, I'm too old for you guys. Ha ha ha. My parents had the first 2 albums, and I was hooked.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're not too old. You're only as old as you feel, in my opinion, anyways. All right, John Collins.
John Collins, do you all think that MTV is now an abomination?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. It's been that way for a long, long time.
Yep.
Yeah. I can't even remember the last time. They don't even play music on it anymore. I don't know. I don't want to be the 50th million guy to rant about how bad MTV has gotten, but I mean, here I go, right? They don't even play music on it anymore.
There's always room for one more.
I remember when it first started, when that decline first started. Of course, there was always shows that were being played on there, but I remember we were there to watch the music videos, and there came a point in, I think it was the mid 90s, when they stopped playing the whole music video. Do you remember that?
No,
they would do the top 10. They would do the call-in daily 10. You know, you remember that? They do call in and they play the whole video. And it was awesome. You're like, yeah, the whole video, yeah, whatever. And then somewhere in the 90s, maybe late 90s, they would interrupt the video. They'd come on and like, yeah, that was our number 3. I'm like, the video's not over. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's like almost like the songs were like a prop, you know, just so they could do whatever else that they were doing. It had nothing to do with music. Probably like interviews or something, you know. Yeah,
they couldn't even play the whole, like, I guess the kids, you know, that were coming up behind my generation couldn't handle to sit still for a whole music video or watch the whole. It was too, you know,
no attention span.
Yeah, no attention span. That's
I think when MTV started getting into like the real world kind of thing, when, you know, like with the reality shows, when they started to go out of their way to put content that had nothing to do with music at all, that's when the writing was on the wall. Things were definitely starting to change there.
Because in the early 90s, they were pretty slick. They had Alternative Nation. They had some real cutting-edge TV shows. For a while, they were becoming almost culturally relevant. But it was a last hurrah, I'm afraid.
And let's not also talk about here the Headbangers Ball, which was a weekly event. You know, when I was in college, that was always on at whatever party. You know, that always was a good time. You know,
right. Well, we've talked about this before. I've talked about the most obscure like metal bands. You know, like what's the most obscure ones, you know, and stuff like that. And I've said I knew a great deal of them, and that's because I stayed up watching Headbangers Ball past the first hour and 15 minutes. You know, our 2 hours. That third hour of Headbangers Ball, you start to get some deep cut, some bands that aren't so popular, but they were some of my favorite bands. And I've mentioned them before. I won't, you know, like DAD and Bang Tango and some bands that were really good, but they just didn't ever make it because, you know, they weren't being played. But a lot of really good bands. All right, we've got some comments here. Let's take it away.
Mr. Led says, Zuper, do you remember in 68 or 69 when the Paul thing hit? I was mesmerized, glued to my radio.
When the Paul thing hit? I don't know.
The Paul thing. Is that when they thought he was dead? I'm trying to think what else happened to Paul.
Maybe that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go with that.
Amy Smith writes.
Amy.
Anthony is young.
I tell you what, I'm feeling young. I'm feeling better and better as more people are coming forward and saying, "Yeah, I'm 65. Sure, hey, I'm feeling like a kid again. Thank you."
I'm starting to too. Zupalik says their egos got too big. ENC.
Yeah, I think he's talking about the members of the band there. Uh,
Zupalik's Paul thing hit with a question mark. Was that the Paul is dead controversy?
I think
Same
they're
page club. That's where we're all
yeah.
at.
I think they're. Yeah, let's see here. One more. We'll do one more from Amy.
Amy Smith again. I like that Aunt taught me about the 3 stages of the Beatles.
Oh well, you got to teach us about the 3 stages of the Beatles.
Yeah, what are the 3 stages of the Beatles, Amy? I don't remember.
I'm gonna guess beginning,
the
middle,
3
end.
stages. The three stages of how they looked or how they sounded, or
probably a little of both. Didn't their look kind of travel with their sound?
Yeah,
to a
I
degree.
think the longer they spent in the studio, the more they forgot to shave, and so the hair got longer, and
yeah. Well, what's
songs got
crazy
weirder.
is I mean, a real young kid in the 70s, kind of a young kid to teenager in the 80s, and then kind of a young kid or older kid adult in the 90s. And, in the 80s, when I'm looking around all these people with this long hair, and I remember people talking about the Beatles and talking about the Monkees and saying, oh, these guys had long hair. There's a long-haired hippies. And like when the Beatles first came out, they were saying that about the Beatles when they first came out, and their hair was like maybe down to here. It was just uncut was all. It wasn't like long. And I do know that in the 60s, there were some people with some really long hair, but I'm like, I wouldn't have characterized if I had hair that short, during that, people would have been happy. My parents would have been happy.
It just goes to show you how the Beatles, everything they did broke ground, including not getting a haircut. Like that's how far it went.
Yeah, right. For sure.
Superplex. Yes, I certainly remember. There was a TV special on WR Channel 9 about that controversy in New York City.
I'm not sure I know. Maybe I missed something there. Maybe they're talking back and forth.
I still think they're on the whole Paul is dead bit.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
All right. See you, Georgia.
Oh, Georgia. Peace out, Girl Scout.
Yeah, peace out, Girl Scout. All right, we got another question here.
I was 14 all of a sudden. John Collins is back. Anthony, do you think that if John Lennon would have survived that separate of Yoko Ono, he would have become at least a quasi-civil rights leader in earnest?
I don't know. I remember reading some stuff about. Of course, this is Yoko. I think that was saying it, that a lot of the peace and love stuff, they kind of realized that it was a rabbit hole they shouldn't have gone down as much as they did. That it was a lot of it was just a lot of talk and a lot of hopeful thinking and being too idealistic, and I think that bubble burst after a period of time, really. So I don't know that he would have gone that far. I think they kind of took it far enough, really. They did a lot of far out things in the name of peace,
Yeah.
And that certainly sounds like something Yoko would have said.
Right.
This whole civil rights thing went too far.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm sorry we look stupid standing there naked and doing a bed in and
Does everybody hate Yoko Ono or no?
Hate is a strong word. Can't tolerate is more the point.
Right. And I think
Anthony,
one of the
forgive
things.
me if you're not as anti-Yoko as, well, the rest of us. I apologize. I'm not trying to stir the anthill.
No, I mean, I was never a fan of hers in any way. If anything I could say about her that would be positive, I do think that she probably was a positive influence on John in the later half of life. Like when, because they went through a period where she threw him out, and this was in the early 70s.
He was living with May.
That's the whole lost weekend when he was out on the other coast. That turned into like a year and a half where, she threw him out, and he came back and they reconciled in 75. And that's when they had Sean. And I think, and then by the time he was 5, now we're up to 1980. And I think John was more of a family man and had more of his wits about him. And she was, along with him for that. It seemed like, and this is what's so sad, is that it seemed like John had genuinely reached a point in his life where he wanted to get things back again, wanted to make music sober, wanted to be a father. And then that had to happen. But I do think that she might have been good for. Now the album sucked, the whole Double Fantasy. I was listening to it recently. I was like, I'm just gonna go try this album again. And it was like, oh my God, the stuff her like every other song, because that's how they would do it. Like his song, her song, his song, her song, and it's like, how do you even put that? Like that album was great for a compact disc, just because I don't know how you sit through it. With it, and I hated getting up and moving the needle. That's, give me a great album that I don't have to touch,
Right.
But no, I was never really a big fan of hers at all,
No, but do you think we talked about this earlier, but I kind of want you to answer it here as well. And that is, do you think that her being credited for ruining the Beatles was overblown?
Yeah. It wasn't her fault. I mean, I think ultimately it's John's fault that he kind of went down some roads, especially with the drugs. She was in there with him doing the drugs, and they did drugs together, and they got busted, and they went through that. And John went through a period, the Cold Turkey song, just go listen to the lyrics, and he talks about how he tried to break free of H. I think he tied himself to a chair for a couple of days just to try to get himself off of it, and not even that worked. He was right back on it in the early part of the 70s. So there was a lot of dark times, and so I think that her with him, plus her showing up in the studio was just kind of weird for the other guys. I mean, it didn't, like, the documentary doesn't show anybody having any kind of issue. Paul, I think, mentions to the camera that it feels a bit weird that she's kind of just shows up and is sitting there. It's just kind of odd, but it wasn't a huge problem. I think the bigger problem is just that she was in his life and all that meant,
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, when I grew up, the mythos certainly was that Yoko Ono was the reason the band broke up, or at least, I don't know, the camel that broke the straw's back. But
well, it's kind of like, if you can say, well, that friend of mine was really cool until he started going out with her, and then that kind of ruined. So do you blame her, or do you blame him for changing who he was and doing a bunch of things he shouldn't have? You know what I mean? So who do you really blame? You can't totally blame her. There's a lot going on there. So
it's dynamic. It rarely comes down to like one thing.
Yeah. Plus, then put on top of all of that, the biggest band in the world, no real pressure, right?
Right. No real pressure at all.
John H. Hello, John H. Hi, everyone. I just returned from the $1.25 tree.
$1.25 tree. Hi,
possibly
John.
the biggest marketing blunder in American retail history, they're saying.
Let's see.
They went a long time, didn't they, before having to raise that?
They did. Hey, you know what? The 5 and dime survived for decades, so maybe the tree will pull it out too.
Maybe.
Oh, Mr. Lid says George introduced or at least popularized the sitar for that time.
Yeah. I think so. I think he did. People remembering the Friday night videos here. A lot of people saying hi. A lot of interactions. Let's see.
It was a good chat when they interact with each other. Superplex. YouTube replaced MTV, which was a product of the devil. Snap. Ooh, Superplex came to play.
All right. Well,
when it comes to YouTube, I think YouTube trumps television. There's so much to dig into: concerts, documentaries, interviews, even stuff like what we do, stuff that the average person creates, in their basement or wherever. I think is much more interesting than a lot of the garbage that's on television. So I'm fascinated way more by YouTube. Like, I own a television, but I can tell you I rarely ever turn it on.
You're mostly just watch stuff on your computer.
It's not much there that interests me. No.
Yeah.
I use my TVs as a DVD player.
That's true. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Superblick says, "Do you guys like to discuss the Beatles parody The Ruttles?"
That I have to say something about that, and I'll let everybody else respond. Hilarious, hilarious. Eric Idle, was it Eric? I think it was Eric Idle. I love
Yes.
that show. I absolutely love it. And one of my favorite scenes is when the person is on a truck backing away. You just think the camera's backing away, but really he's taking off, and Eric Idle's running after him, trying to do his monologue. I thought that was hilarious. And then they said, was that the bigger than the Jesus thing? And then people was like, they were buying Beatles albums just to destroy them. That was hilarious. Yes. If you guys want to chime in on that, you're more than welcome to talk about that parody.
Anthony?
I don't know anything about the Ruttles.
Oh,
I would always look at it and say, "What the hell is that? That's not the Beatles," and then just move on. That's the extent of my Ruttles knowledge. So
it was sort of, I guess you'd say, this is Spinal Tap, but if This Is Spinal Tap was done around a band like the Beatles.
right.
And it was done by Eric Idle. And you may or may not know, guys may or may not know, Eric Idle and George Harrison were actually very, very close friends. Eric Idle actually Eric Idle directed his George Harrison's Crackerbox Palace video.
Right.
Oh, okay.
John Collins says,
I think we already did this one.
yeah, we did this one.
Oh,
It
did
bears
we?
repeating. Yeah, I think
Okay.
John tried to spam us. Oh, naughty John. No, I'm
Well,
kidding. I'm teasing.
you know, in all fairness, I can't get to everything, especially when there's a lot of people chatting. So
Tell you what, though, I've got a question for all of you, and that
okay.
is, who is your favorite Beatle, like in terms of solo career? And that's for anybody out there in the chat too. Like,
yeah.
what's your favorite?
What would you say, Thrash Pondo?
As far as solo career goes, and not
Yeah,
my
like who
favorite,
is your favorite Beatle solo?
George Harrison.
Okay.
George Harrison. They all had good stuff. I almost went with Paul because of the Live and Let Die soundtrack, or Band on the Run, which is one of my favorite singles. He had just had some great stuff. The man wrote a song about his pet dog, and it made the top 40. Jet is about his.
Oh, was that?
dog.
Yeah, I was just listening to that the other day. I love that song. It's such a great song.
And Jet's mother was Sergeant Major, which is why Sergeant Major was a lady. It's just such a cute, lovable song. But I would have to go with George Harrison with I can't think of the name of the track. I'm so ashamed now. But the way I feel is that song. You know the one. What is life?
Oh,
Anyway, yeah, please help me out
What
here.
is
I'm
life?
floundering. Okay,
What
that
is
doesn't
life?
sound
Yeah.
right. What is life? I think is a great song, and I would have to go with George Harrison as my favorite soloist from the Beatles.
Yeah. I would have to look inside the Beatles. It's John. Outside the Beatles, it's Paul McCartney for me. I kind of grew up on Paul McCartney's solo career, rather more than John's solo career. So, but
Yeah.
inside the Beatles, as I go back and I listen to the Beatles, I definitely like John's tracks better. I think they're a little bit more meaningful. Paul is the one who has the more pop sensibility, of course, but I find John a little bit more in depth. But outside the Beatles, I'll be honest with you. I think John just gets too existential for my taste. I don't need a degree in philosophy to listen to a song. I just don't. And and with Paul, he's philosophical enough that I can pick up what he's laying down. With John, again, it's what he talks about and stuff is just like, okay, listen, I'm taking notes. I'm like over here. All right, let's hear it, Professor. I just don't need that in my entertainment, personally speaking. So I don't know. What do you think, Anthony?
Definitely Paul. I was just always drawn to his way of crafting songs, and I think that even though he didn't put out a lot of solid albums, he always had maybe one song or two on each of his albums that totally broke the charts, and they were great songs, like Band on the Run, stuff on that album, very strong. And he had other hits throughout the 70s that I thought were very, like, they could have been Beatles songs. You can kind of hear what he brought into the Beatles, that the poppier side and the more melodic side, and the stuff that John would kind of get pissed off about, like Moon in June, kind of like rhyming stuff, because John was a bit more edgier, and or at least towards the later part. But I was always drawn to Paul, and I always really enjoyed his stuff.
Zuberblick says the early Beatles were the Quarrymen. Then there was the Beatles of I Want to Hold Your Hand. Then there were the Beatles of Rubber Soul and beyond.
I think that was like maybe answering the three stages of the Beatles. John's question makes my
John's question makes my head hurt.
My head hurt. All right, let's see if we got anything. Let's see.
Roth Myers says Yoko is definitely not everyone's cup of tea, not mine.
Is anybody out there? I mean, I don't know. Is anybody out there really like a Yoko fan? I mean, really? Like, I really don't know anybody who's like, have you heard the latest Yoko Ono album? Because I mean,
yeah, I really can't really wait for the new Yoko. I've never heard anybody say that,
Yeah.
Maybe Sean Lennon.
Things you don't hear. Yeah, maybe that one. Maybe Sean has said that.
What about his other son who had the
not Julian
music career?
I recently saw Julian in an interview, and he was trying desperately not to say anything ill of his father's second wife, but apparently to this day there's animosity there. And apparently there was a story of, if you'll indulge me, there was something from the Lennon estate that Julian desperately wanted, and the woman made him buy it at auction.
Oh, really? Wow.
And it's
I got to keep that money coming in.
And the irony is, he goes, I receive a stipend from my father's estate. So I used money from my father's estate to buy an object from my father's estate, and the money went to my father's estate. So, I mean, it was asinine. You should have just given the kid, I say kid, he's older than I am. You should have just given Julian the darn piece and made peace with him. Because apparently Julian and Sean get along fine. So I don't know why Yoko still has this animosity. But what do I know? John Collins says, the ideal peace and love is rabbit hole.
Is that's a little odd. I don't know exactly. Is a rabbit hole or hole? That's weird. Yeah, it is a rabbit hole. I've actually talked about this before on some of my when I get philosophical, about the following the music of where you go from the hippie movement to its disintegration, and then out of that disintegration comes the punk rock and disco movement, and then out of that comes the heavy metal movement, and then out of that comes, not out of it, but as a result of it or a backlash to it in some extensions, comes the alternative rock music, and then now it's after that, and it's a very logical progression. The logic of it is the hippies wanted to do drugs idealistically. They wanted that, but they had no real substance to their ideas. It was just, if you did drugs, the world would be a better place. And it was a revolt against, in a large way, against Christianity. But they didn't have anything of real substance to hang on to. And so it burnt out very quickly. And when it burnt out very quickly, you had two responses to it. The two responses were, hey, I'm just going to have a good time and party, hence the disco music. And the other response to it is, I'm just going to beat everybody up and hate everybody, which was the punk rock movement. And each one of those didn't last very long either, because number one, the disco movement is like trying to survive on cotton candy, just doesn't work. And you can't survive on hate. It's just not there. And so those two movements died out fairly quickly. So it's a whole shtick that I do in my philosophy class when I get to teach philosophy on occasion. All right. Let's go. Let's talk about, I love music and philosophy and how ideas in philosophy affect music and how music affects the public and stuff like that. It's just something that I love to talk about. Um People are chiming in here. Amy Smith says, I'll just read it here. Paul. Tracy Rothmeyer says John.
No Ringos, huh?
No, you know what did
I
I
know,
hate
I
I
know.
hate to be mean, but what did Ringo did he really bring? I mean, he was a great drummer, right? But what
Yeah,
were
Some,
you
well,
but
and
not
saying?
a lot. Some, but
What
not
were-
a lot. Octopus's Garden, and there's When I'm 64. He wrote When I'm 64, I believe.
oh, that
did
was
he? I
Paul.
don't know.
I
Did he write
believe he.
that? I thought that was a Paul song.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to bet that Ringo wrote it, but I could be wrong.
Mm.
But that just popped into my head. Things pop into my head and they pop out. But and John H says, for any Seinfeld fans here, Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld were compared to John Lennon and Paul McCartney, respectively.
Hmm.
No, that's interesting. I mean, when that team broke up in Seinfeld, that's when I started to lose interest in the show. There was a noticeable change. I don't know if you guys are fans of that show, but Seinfeld, I used to love it just because of the way they would have multiple stories going on at once, and then they found a way to tie it up beautifully at the end. And I thought that was a real art to be able to do that. And that kind of changed once Larry David left. Things were just they kind of went more for the cheaper jokes, and the multiple stories weren't really there, and they didn't tie it up at the end, kind of left it just average ending. And so I don't know, there's something to be said for these teams, you know,
Mm.
because Larry
Yeah.
David, it's kind of similar. He went on and did his own show,
Mm.
kind of
Yes,
like
he
how
did.
they all went solo and had their own careers, but the magic of the duo,
Right. Right.
And John Collins says, Ian, you do have a degree in philosophy.
Technically I don't. I have a degree in theology. But I did have to take a ton of philosophy. So it was largely made up of a lot of philosophy courses, but my degree is technically in theology and in divinity. All right, let's see here. Oh, someone's writing. Well, look here.
Oh, Superflex says
You
deep ENC.
you haven't even heard. That was like the beginning of it. That was like the very beginning of it. It gets kind of religious too, but it is, I mean, that I do kind of flesh that out a little bit with the bands, and I talk about, and you can hear me talk about that from time to time on here about the philosophy of music and how actually existential philosophy and hedonism. You know, the 80s were all about hedonism. I mean, really, I mean, that's
Tell me
hedonistic
about it.
philosophy,
I
and
miss
and
the 80s.
and not the Epicurean hedonism, but the
Yeah.
maximist hedonistic religions or ideals. All right, let's see.
John Collins says, Anthony said they went too far down me peace and love rabbit hole.
That's what I think. That's what he was getting at. That's what he meant. All right, a couple more comments here.
Jay Aldridge. Hello, Jay.
Hey,
Country
Jay.
singer Joe Diffie did a song bigger than the Beatles. It was a great, funny song. I like it already.
I like it already too. All right. Well, we're kind of coming at the end. We've been on here for almost an hour and a half. Before we go, though, I kind of want to ask Anthony. I haven't seen anything, on your channel for a while. You got a lot
Yeah.
of good stuff. Are you going to start doing some more stuff as a result of this interview?
I am. I've been planning for a while. I've just had some other things going on in my life, good stuff, but I had to get some stuff done first, and so it delayed me. I really wanted to take a month off, and it turned into 11 or 12, which is just kind of the way it was. But yeah, I am working on a couple of shows, and I'm really hoping to get them out by the end of the month. So I'm working on it. Definitely. I want to come back and do some more. So
Yeah.
definitely.
Well, you're always welcome to come back on this channel as well and share your music expertise. Every once in a while, like I'll do a music show and I'll have like Pat McCormick on and Redbeard, and we'll just talk about some music topic. And one of the music topics that I'm going to be talking about here shortly, well, in a while, is Ozzy Osbourne's guitarists. So we're going to sit and chew the fat on Ozzy Osbourne's guitarists here in a bit. Tell everybody where they can find you online. That's just in case everybody's listening at the end. But put it out there again.
Yeah, well, you can just go to rushtrader.com. That's my website. That will lead you to my YouTube channel as well. You can go right there. YouTube. I don't have the direct address in my head, but you can go.
Just Rush Trader. If you go Rush Trader,
and you'll see the link there, and would love to see you.
Yeah, please. Definitely. If you have not subscribed to his channel already, go over and subscribe to his channel. And even though he hasn't done any content for a while, you're going to need to catch up because he's done a lot of great content already.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's incredible. Thrash, everybody already knows, but what do you got going on over at your channel these days?
And yes, I can be reached over here at Thrash Pondo Ponds, the content channel, naturally, and I have a new offer for all my soon-to-be fans out there. All new subscribers have a personalized content on their behalf. All you have to do is be a new subscriber, go to any one of my posts and just say, hey there, Thrash, new subscriber, please do a post on this topic. And provided it's in good taste, I will do it. Be it old movies, old TV shows, old music, vintage sci-fi, vintage, you know the stuff that I'm an expert at. So you pick the topic and I do the post. And welcome aboard.
Oh, yeah. Welcome aboard. I have to address this here. Ian, I said that because you said you don't need a degree in philosophy to listen to music. I get it. I meant when I'm thinking about like songs I want to listen to, I don't think about how to employ my philosophy, my degree, to try to listen to it or whatever. So that's kind of why I went into that. I thank you for that though. I'm not, so Dave's got a show on Wednesday. I'm not going to be there, guys. I'm sorry. I thought that he was taking some time off, and I booked a guest to be not on a live chat, but the people over, they run a podcast called Metal Tavern, and we are going to be talking about the darker side of metal. We're going to be talking about like Metallica and everything kind of thrash metal and speed metal, and not because I'm trying to glorify that industry, but it is well worth talking about. I mean, it's part of what makes up the music industry. And so, John, you keep posting this. I said this already. Well, wait. Who's saying sorry to hear that, ENC? What is this? What's going on here?
Oh, they're all lamenting the fact you won't be there on Wednesday for.
Gosh! I'm like, what are you so? Yeah, unfortunately, I won't be able to be there. John, we said this. What's going on, buddy? Maybe is your hand on the enter key or something like that?
Maybe it bears repeating.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, maybe he's like got his key stuck or something like that.
Perhaps he was dictating.
Yeah, and if you want to catch me, I'm going to be on Fat Samurai Guy's show again on Thursday. If you want to catch up with me there, we're going to be talking about Batman Returns versus Iron Man 3. Those are the words I'm looking for. Batman Returns versus Iron Man 3. So should be a lot of fun over there. I like hanging out with that crowd. It's a little bit of a different crowd than Dave's crowd. That's for sure. But I did not know that Dave was going to be on. So I booked this and they kind of made adjustments to their schedule. So I I just have to be able to keep that interview. But that'll be interesting to kind of talk about the darker side of metal.
I will make wry comments in your honor. I will keep it going for both of us.
Yes. Yeah. Well, everybody, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. I love you all. You really, it's the highlight of my week. I love doing this. It's a lot of fun. You guys are so active in the channel that it just makes me so happy that, you guys actually contribute to what's going on here. So I just want to thank you for that. And thank you, Thrash, as always, for being part of this. And Anthony, thank you so much for being part of this as well.
Thank you very much. It was nice to meet you, Thrash Pondo, and of course, Ian. It's been great getting to know you too. You've got a great channel, and the interaction's been great. Want to thank everyone that said hi and made a comment, and would love to come back and do it another time.
Yeah,
definitely.
That'd be wonderful.
Want to say a final thanks to my sponsors. Derek at Flickstacks and Knickknacks supports me on Patreon. So does Dave Sundstrom, supports me on Patreon, and John Collins and Tracy Rothmeyers. And if you want to get all my videos, not all of them, but most all of them, and all my podcasts one day ahead of everybody else and be part of that Insiders Club, head on over to the Patreon page and be part of that Honeycomb Hideout. And as always, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and share this on your favorite social media. Thank you all, everybody, and good night.